90. So at the bottom of page 97 is the short mandala offering. So we'll do the short mandala offering, and then over the page, request to turn the wheel of Dharma will go into English, and then refuge and bodhicitta back into Tibetan. And then after that, we'll just take a minute and really let that sink in before I start the public talk. So at the bottom of page 97, short mandala offering, requesting the teachings, requesting the retreat, requesting blessings, receptivity. Perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Yedam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami Vasange Chodam Zogi Chodam La Janju Badu Dani Gapsuch Dagi Jinyan Gi Bezonam Gi Drola Benji Sange Drupash Sange Chodam Zogi Chodam Janchu Badu Dani Gyabzuchi Dagi Jinyan Gi Bezonam Drola Benji Sange Drupash Sange Chodam Zogi Chodam Janchu Badu Dani Gyabzuchi Dagi Junyan Gi Bezonam Drola Benji Sange Drupasho. And just taking a minute to really connect with what is my refuge? What is bodhicitta? Why do we go for refuge? Why do we need bodhicitta? And how do refuge and bodhicitta manifest internally and externally in our actions of body, speech, and mind? Okay, so you can relax your attention. And welcome everybody. I can't even begin to tell you how happy I am to do Lamrim, to do the whole thing without skipping any bits, to be unapologetically Buddhist, to really go deeply into these things. It's the best thing we can do with our life, really. And to do the Lamrim has such preciousness because I think if we've been Dharma students a long time, we go to a lot of public talks and courses and retreats that focus on a particular part of the path. this section in depth, that section in depth, but actually to get the overview, and not just the overview, but then to penetrate down into it, isn't something that happens all that often, where you get the whole thing. Not cherry picking, not going, oh, I don't really get that bit, let's just hop over it. Yeah, or that bit is a little confronting, I'd rather not look there, moving on. Or that bit must be Tibetan culture, those weirdos. We actually going through the whole thing, not skipping any bits, which means that also the missing pieces within our own practice can get fleshed out. Parts where we're missing the point, where we're missing inspiration, where we've had a niggling doubt, we can start to really confront those things because we're not skipping anything. And I think it's just so powerful to actually have the courage to go into the parts that inspire you, but you're not sure why, and to have the courage to go into the parts that confuse you or trigger doubt, and really dive into why is that. Is it logic-based or is it emotionally based? Is it from some old hang-up from your background, or is it actually a valid doubt that needs to be sorted out and challenged? Because we know that even the Buddha himself said, don't take things on board just because I said so. We have to prove these things to ourselves. So this is such a good chance for us to make sure we're not paying lip service to those parts of the path that come easily, and that we're not just quietly jumping over those parts of the path that we'd rather not look at. I've done a Lamrim retreat of some kind or another every single year for the last 15 years at least, and it never feels old. I never feel like I've finished, because I haven't. Right? And every time we approach it, it goes a little deeper. And so, anyway, I'm really glad that people wanted to do the Lamrim, because it means I get to do the Lamrim. Yay! Right? So it means a good opportunity for me to go into the bits that really, I know, charge up the rest of my practice. And so when we say Lamrim, we know what these words in Tibetan mean. Do you remember? Lam, Rim. Shout it out. Now we're all embarrassed. We're like, oh crap, I don't remember. Stages of the path, exactly. Stages of the path, or the graduated path. Exactly. Which, this format of the Lamrim teaching, we know is just so elegant and so logical and so poetic and so cohesive, and that the work of Atisha, and where we're drawing from Lama Tsong Khapa, that the beauty of this work is that they arranged the Buddha's teachings so that you didn't have to meet the Buddha to meet his teachings. Before the Lamrim teachings, Buddhism of course existed and flourished in many parts of the world, but it was very easy to come across teachings that were given missing parts. Yeah, not completely fleshed out, some distortions, some gaps. Not that that was the case everywhere, but it was quite common. And Lama Tsong Khapa in particular in the 14th century really looked at, where are we confused? Where have things gotten a little bit distorted and strange? Where have people become a little bit nutty with their ethics, or a little bit watered down in their approach? And he really drew on the work, of course, of Atisha, who came several hundred years before him. So these Lamrim teachings are just incredibly precious, because it means we have all of the Buddha's 40 years of teaching after his enlightenment in 3 simple volumes, right? As opposed to all of these. Yeah, and when you read the Lamrim Chenmo, the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, you realize just how incredibly brilliant Lama Tsong Khapa was as both a scholar and a practitioner, because basically he's like, here's the point, here are the common doubts about the point, here is logic to address that point, now here's a beautiful section of poetry to make you excited and happy about it, and now here's a nice life story or an anecdote to kind of give you more fuel, and now let's move on to the next logical step. It's just so tidy and beautiful. So we have copies of it up in the library if you haven't reread it in a while, or if you've never dug into the whole thing. But if you're not in the mood to go through the whole thing, you do have course materials which have the main bits. So if you would like to turn to the very first page of your course materials, it says Main Lamrim Topics. Look, live streamers. Oh, hey, guess what? I've got an extra one. Haha. For just such an occasion. Great. so just so we're reoriented, because some of us have done a lot of study and some of us haven't got round to it. Let's just get all on the same page. Ah, look, something you prepared earlier, like Julia Child. Excellent. Yep, she's onto it. Beauty. Okay. So what we're looking at is just a very rough outline, but if at any point during the retreat you kind of feel like you're losing what is the point of this topic or kind of where does this fit in the path, you can just keep coming back to this first page and go, oh yeah, right, okay. Click. Okay. So, so just to refresh our memory, the Lamrim is divided into what are called the three scopes. And the three scopes can be approached from two different perspectives. So it's either the scope of your capacity or ability, or it's the scope of your motivation and goal. So whenever we're practicing the path, these are the questions to ask ourselves. What is my current capacity and ability? And what is my current motivation and goal? Because they sometimes synchronize and sometimes don't. So for example, we could look at the teachings held in common with beings of the small scope, like impermanence and death, right? Good old impermanence and death, never going to go out of style. Absolutely vital that we look at impermanence and death every day, otherwise what happens? Lazy bones, right? Classic. So we could do this, what's called an initial scope practice or a small scope practice. And in theory, the goal of things in this category are just to get another perfect human rebirth, to continue the spiritual path, having some sort of higher rebirth. But what we want to do is to say, okay, my level might be, all I can do today is remember impermanence and death. But may I do that with a great scope motivation, with a bodhicitta motivation, that I do this in order to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. Yeah, so you have one level which is your actual capacity, but then another which is your actual framework that you're moving towards. Because the difficulty is that if you say my capacity is only to look at impermanence and death, which means the only motivation, the only striving I have is just to get another human rebirth or another higher rebirth to continue my path, that means the momentum you create while contemplating impermanence and death ends there when you achieve that goal. Whereas if you actually aim for the highest, if you aim for enlightenment, then the momentum of that practice carries on all the way until enlightenment. Does that make sense? So when we look at the scopes, the three scopes, we're looking at two levels. We're looking at what is our current capacity or what is the category of this teaching, but also what is our own motivation with it. And as Mahayana practitioners, whatever level we're looking at, we want to be bringing the greatest scope, the Mahayana motivation to it, even if it's something that falls in the category of the preliminaries. You with me so far? Questions? Ringing bells? Sounding familiar? Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Okay. So it's important just for auspiciousness and for cohesion and important. So my training in the Lamrim Chenmo particularly came at Chenrezig Institute with Khensa Rinpoche Geshe Tashi Tsering, who was the former abbot of Gyume Tantra College. And he gave the oral transmission of the whole 3-volume text, as well as, of course, having many supportive Lamrim texts like Foundation of All Good Qualities, like 3 Principal Aspects of the Path, a lot of these shorter texts as well. And his teachers were people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, like Trijang Rinpoche, like Ling Rinpoche. And so it's a pure lineage that can be traced all the way back to the Buddha. The particular text we're going to rely on in this retreat is the 3 Principal Aspects of the Path, which is in your course material. So we'll be looking at it at least once a day. 3 Principal Aspects of the Path, it's maybe 4 pages long. And it's basically, I think, the best way to make sure that whatever practice you're doing is a complete practice. Yeah, that whatever you happen to be getting on with, that you have the 3 main points imbuing it. So who remembers what the 3 principal aspects of the path are, which are different than the 3 scopes? Number 1, renunciation. Renunciation. What's a more friendly way to define renunciation or translate renunciation? Determination to be free, or determination to emerge, exactly. Emerge from samsara. Yeah, so if our practice has a real recognition of what are the actual causes for suffering, and let's stop doing that. That is the main point, right? What's the second kind of main point, or the next main principle? Do you remember? Something about friendliness. Something about others. Bodhicitta, exactly. And bodhicitta is what, generally speaking? Yep, absolutely. So it's the main Mahayana motivation, which has 2 aspirations: to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And, at some point we want it to be a main mind, but for us it's a mental factor, a thought that we have to generate. But it's an essential piece. Otherwise, our practice could be going very well, and then we forget that we're doing it not just for ourselves, and we start to leave others behind. We could become a very brilliant meditator, having all sorts of interesting, blissful experiences, and just get lost in the extreme of peace and leave everyone behind. So without bodhicitta, it is not Mahayana practice. So then what's the last one? Yeah, the wisdom realizing emptiness, the correct view. The emptiness of what? Self. Yep. What kind of self? An inherently existent self. Yep, the emptiness of an inherently existent self, which is different than no self at all whatsoever. No, we are not nihilists. Disclaimer. Stamp it into your brain, right? We are not nihilists. So we're going to use the 3 principal aspects of the path, which was composed by Lama Tsong Khapa. And Lama Tsong Khapa, really, it's such a beautiful set of teachings because it's only a few pages long, but you get the whole point. So we'll be revisiting that text again and again throughout the retreat. And I think that it's a really important way to bring a big retreat like this back into your daily practice. If you can make friends with a short text that kind of becomes your go-to, something that it becomes like an old friend, really, where you can kind of come back to it each day and go, oh yeah, that's what I'm about. Oh yeah, that's the point. And you just come back to it again and again and again, and different days, different verses pop for you. Different days, different things are emphasized, but if you can start to really bring something repetitive into your daily practice, and you probably already have many things in your daily practice which you repeat each day, but to have something Lamrim based is really essential, and this is one that I like. And so the oral transmission for this text I received from Khensa Rinpoche, Geshe Tashi Tsering, as well as His Eminence Chuden Rinpoche, etc. etc. So that's the disclaimer, background, necessary bits. Has anyone never done long retreat before? Longer than 2 days? Okay. Yep. Yeah, okay, a couple. All right. So this is, that's good that no one's alone. No one's alone. We're going to start gently. But it is different to do a residential retreat than it is to do a retreat that you can come and go to. And the benefit of it is that you keep continuity. So if you start having some real breakthroughs in your practice, it's not like you go home and do the dishes and walk the dog and forget all about it, because you're still in the same space. You can actually build some amazing continuity much quicker than if you're doing a coming and going. So the residential atmosphere is really very supportive, and the fact that it's over many days is really helpful. So just loose advice that you can take or leave is don't go for long walks off the property. You can go for long walks around the property, go to the pond, go to the pine grove, go look at some sheep, But if you kind of can stay in the general area, this is a place where there have been many meditators doing a lot of work over a number of years, and we might as well ride their coattails. Yeah, we might as well use the fact that they've created a really sacred space to help us go as deeply as we can. So of course, if you're getting cabin fever, this is not a tantric retreat, so it's not like you're restricted. If you need to run away and go to the beach for a day, I'm not going to know. But but it's best if you can stay in the general property. It's also best if you can contain retreat in a way by watching your speech. So it's not a silent retreat, but we do want to try to create quietness. So what we're going to do is at the end of each session, we'll go into, or the end of the day, we're going to go into silence until after breakfast. So everybody have a nice quiet breakfast. And in a way it's quite nice, because then you don't feel the pressure to have small talk when you're kind of in a quiet morning contemplative mood anyway. But then when you're released into being able to speak, try not to let it explode into a cafe environment. Yeah, you know, if you have to talk about the footy, okay, but I'd rather you didn't, just because it's going to distract the atmosphere that you're creating internally. So if in the back of your mind you think less is more, verbally, less is more. If I really want to talk about ideas, if I really want to connect with the people of the retreat, that's fine and good. And please, if you are feeling a little bit cabin fevery, please do talk to each other, but be very conscious that it's Dharma or Dharma related, and at the very least, not gossip. So an easy way to kind of get us into that atmosphere is to just think of turning the volume down. The easiest way to know if your speech has gotten attachment into it is when the volume raises and when the speed increases. Yeah, that's a good way to know if I've gotten a bit of attachment into my speech. So if you notice yourself getting loud, then probably an affliction has co-opted it for its own use. If you notice yourself speeding up, probably an affliction has co-opted it for its use. So please do connect with each other. I think it's really enriching for a retreat atmosphere to talk and bond with each other, but just in a gentle, quiet way. And if for some reason you want absolute silence during the whole retreat, we have silence badges, and Sarah probably mentioned, yeah. So if you want, yeah, just there. Orange silence badges. If someone is wearing it, don't talk to them. Smile and wave. Okay, so any questions about that? Excellent, okay. So, all right, why do we do Lamrim practice? Why do we do Lamrim practice? Why not just do one topic? What do you reckon? What brought you to this retreat, as opposed to any number of other retreats, what you could have gone to? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally valid reason. Totally valid reason. Yeah, any other reasons? Yeah.
Overview of the whole story of what the whole retreat's about, rather than just bit by bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every so often it's nice to focus on the total picture.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Incorporation with the meditation and the text.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Integrating.
Integrate.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the best ways to move all of these teachings that we've heard intellectually, to really move them down into the heart. Absolutely. Yeah.
To create mental order.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in theory, mental order. Yeah, absolutely. But it does help, because we probably have heard a lot of things over a number of years, but somehow getting them to fall into place of this goes first and this goes second and this informs that. And the reason this happens is because of these things that came before it. Sometimes when we don't practice, it's almost because we know too much and it's hard to start, because we're overwhelmed by what we know intellectually. Then when we actually sit down, there's so many options of what we could be meditating on. We're kind of like, breath? Or how that can happen is sometimes we can be around so long that we were maybe better practitioners when we were brand new and didn't know anything. Yeah, and then as we started to learn more and more, we get a little bit overwhelmed with what we know, and then it's hard to start anything. So if this retreat can be a way for us to, as you said, organize your thoughts, repetition, get the overview, but also know how to approach each one of these topics. And so this particular retreat, the structure of it is in 3-day cycles. And this was actually from Lama Zopa Rinpoche himself. It's a really beautiful way to go through the whole path again and again. And despite the fact that it's going to be repeated, each cycle will have a slightly different nuance and a slightly different aspect, so that if you're here for the whole retreat, you're going to get slightly different angles on the same ideas. But if you're here for only 3 days, at least you'll get the whole path. But this was actually from Rinpoche himself, and I think it's a very skillful thing to do, because it means when you go back to your daily practice, it's a very nice thing to do for your daily practice, where instead of overwhelming yourself, you say, all right, today is a death day, or today is a refuge day, or today is a bodhicitta day, but all the rest of the path is informing that one topic that you pick. So it doesn't feel like you're flooding your system with options, but also you're not neglecting the fact that the whole path is important. So it's a really interesting structure, and I'm excited to give it a go with you guys. Also it means that if we've done a meditation and you feel unsettled with it, you'll have enough space from it to be able to ask about it the next time it comes around. Yeah, and go, okay, so the last time we did that, I had this doubt. Can we talk about it? And each day we'll have a discussion group time where we can really unpack some things. So I guess the next bit is, are there things you want to happen in this retreat that you really hope to happen, that you're banking on? Suggestions from the group or requests? Mm-hmm. Requests from each other. Yeah. Friendliness. Yeah, try and be nice. Yeah, don't be mean. Common sense, right? Yeah, if you do see a random tourist wander onto the property, or you do see someone who looks at loose ends, just smile at them. Yeah, make sure they're okay. Occasionally we'll get a stray staggering, go, what is this place? I feel drawn here. And if the first person they meet is, we're not talking, we're in retreat, bugger off, then it's not the greatest for their ripening, right? So anyway. So the other piece I want to make sure we talk about is that your approach to retreat is as important as the content of the retreat. Does that make sense? Your approach to the retreat is as important, or if not more important, than the content itself. And so it will become like a microcosm of how you are in your daily life. What happens to you when you're inspired? Does it naturally turn into excitement, agitation, attachment, all sorts of excessive projects, and then spill over into chaos? Or does it stay as happily enriching? What happens when you're confused and have doubt? Do you then necessarily spiral into depression, despair, or irritation, aggravation, laziness, to hell with this? What happens to us when these things arise? It's kind of like all of the things in a life happen in retreat. Yeah, so you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. And those are not a problem or a good sign either way. What's success or failure is, what do you do when you meet these things in yourself? So when you meet confusion, how do you take confusion on the path without letting it turn into a negative state of mind? When you meet inspiration, how do you meet inspiration without letting it turn into attachment, etc.? So really whatever's happening, whether it's good news or bad news on the surface, really a good retreat is when you don't avoid and skirt around what's coming up for you, but try to really sit with it. And really look at, what is my approach to this material, not just the material. So yeah, does that make sense? So there will be bits in the path where you maybe haven't given them as much airtime as other bits, and you probably will be either confused, or your old doubts will come up, or a bit of an existential crisis might arise, and that is all totally normal. Or you might have a cruisy retreat with nothing in particular happening and just be like, yeah, this is great, yay, the Dharma. Also fine, right? So it's not like you have to introduce or invite drama if none is there, but it's also normal if stuff is coming up, because we're starting to really dig into what is our belief systems. So, all right, so just a brief summary of what we're getting up to. The preliminaries that we're going to look at is correctly relying on a spiritual friend, which is our guru devotion section. And we've all had probably some discussion or teachings on guru devotion, but what we're doing here is really, what do we do with that information? What is the correct way to approach trust? What is the correct way to approach respect? And what is it that we're actually trusting and respecting? Is it some external figure, or is it a collaboration between outer guru and inner guru? And really what creates that communication, that collaboration between outside wisdom and inside wisdom. And so what we're really looking at here too is we have actual teachers out there in human form, fleshy ones, what smile at us, but what is the teacher-ness in them besides just that personality, that ordinary appearance that we have as a personality to access? What is underneath that, the guru-ness that we're trying to connect to in all things? And so this, while it's a preliminary, is one of the biggest pieces, especially for us modern people, because we don't really know how to have devotion. Yeah, we don't really know what that looks like. We usually go too far one way or the other, where we become so devoted that we lose our common sense. Yeah, and we become susceptible to cults, right? And we get a little glassy-eyed and fanatical and a bit creepy and groupie-ish, right? That happens. Or we go the other way and say, oh, it doesn't really matter. It's about your own wisdom. Anyway, they're just, yeah, blah, blah, right? And we sort of, yeah, get a little bit arrogant, right? So the middle way of this one, and what that looks like internally is really huge. So even though intellectually it's not a hard piece, if we never really dive into guru devotion, the rest of the path is going to miss some energy. So then we'll talk about, then what's a good student? So what immediately pops into your mind of what makes a good student and what makes not as good a student? Is it about intelligence? What is it about then? What makes a good student? What makes a dodgy student? Practicing. Anybody having a pot analogy come to mind? Yeah, we don't want to be all the pot analogies. Yep. So if this is not a pot. This is a singing bowl. But if it were a pot, what kind of pot do we want to be? What happens if you're this kind of pot that's upside down?
Nothing goes in at all.
Nothing goes in at all. So what are you like when you're an upside down pot is the question. Yeah, what are you like when you're either overwhelmed with content and so there's no room, or you think you know everything and so you're this is the place we have to figure out in ourselves, because otherwise we'll never confront it. Okay, so then what if we're a good little upturned pot, all ready to receive but all full of holes? We're a leaker. Then what happens if we're leaky? Nothing sticks. Yeah, nothing sticks. Absolutely. And so if you forget everything, then what happens? Best of intentions. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Yeah. And so what makes you remember? This is the question, right? So if a leaky pot is a forgetful pot, one in one ear, out the other, when you say to yourself, the things I remember, why do I remember them? Why do I remember what I remember? Why do I forget what I forget? These are really personal questions, right? But what pops into your head? It's important.
I remember if I regard it as unimportant.
Exactly. The significance we attribute to it, isn't it? How important we think it is. Absolutely. What else?
Motivation.
Yep, absolutely, your motivation. Yep. And then what's just a really easy strategic way to remember something?
Practice it.
Yeah, practice it. Repetition. Yeah, repetition. So if you say to yourself, oh, I'm never going to be able to get anywhere, I have such a crap memory, well, you just repeat it more, right? Just repeat it more. You have your initial, aha, I've got it. But then if you don't repeat your aha, then it's just going to leak. Yeah. And so we'll have some moments of real aha during retreat, where things you've known for a long time sink in and the penny drops, and you will forget unless you remind yourself. You will forget the beautiful wisdom that you touch in this retreat unless you decide to remember on purpose. And so if you do want to do some private journaling, at the end of the day, what were some little aha moments, or what were some intriguing questions, intriguing doubts? Because questions and doubts are often the step right before the aha. So it's good if you're having doubts and questions. So I think at the end of each day, not probably right before bed because you'll get all woken up, but at some point towards the end of the day, ask yourself, where did the light bulb go on? And where do I have a real question? Just 1 or 2 points. Again, this is take it or leave it, but this is a way for us to not be a leaky pot. So then what's the third kind of pot? You're going the right way up, but then what's in here? Dirty. Right? What kind? What kind? Dirty pot. contaminated pot, poisoned pot, even some say. What would we be poisoned with?
Preconceived ideas.
Preconceived ideas and afflictions, exactly, spot on. For example, what? What's an example of, I'm listening, but I have something there that's distorting what I'm listening to?
Your own idea that keeps getting in the way.
Yeah, your own idea, yeah. You're hung on to some old way of thinking, and so then you take what new information you're hearing and you're tangling it all together. Right, so basically prejudice, yeah. Fundamentalist thinking, I know best thinking. Yeah, so to be a good student are the same qualities that make you a good retreater, right? So when you're in the meditation session, when you're on the spot in the seat, how can you make sure that you're receptive to what's being said, that you're not letting leak out what's being said, and that you're not tangling it with your own negative states of mind? Because, of course, when you have the same retreat leader for every session, at some point, the sound of my voice will annoy you. And my pacing won't be just right, inevitably, which is totally fine, right? Or occasionally, the other side, which is more embarrassing, is you will become in love with the sound of my voice and think you can only meditate if I'm the one leading it. That also happens, which is unfortunate, right? So some form of transference, all right? Yeah, it either goes, oh God, that American accent, I cannot bear it, or she is the root of all glory and wonder, and let us run away together, you none. Yeah. So anyway, these things can happen, and so if in the back of your mind you go, this is just the voice of the teachings right now, and what can happen is that if you can picture your own teachers sitting, behind me or sitting on the top of my head, or somehow you're connecting with your own teachers, and I just happen to be the facilitator. This is one way to help access it, because it will be the repetition of a voice will trigger something. It's just inevitable. Yeah, so if you're really connecting with your own teachers, then it won't matter so much about the harsh R sounds. Yeah, in theory, right? And this is advice from a lot of my own teachers. And if you're going to a teaching with a teacher that you're not as familiar with, or whose style you don't respond to with, it's still the teachings. And so how do you make sure the teachings go in? Because that's really the point, right? It's not about the teacher, it's about the teachings. Yeah, so like that. And then we do perfect human rebirth. And why do we do perfect human rebirth?
To make the most of it.
To make the most of it, right? To make the most of it. Because why? We are the 1%. We are less than 1%, right? You think, surely not. Have you seen my bank account? No, we are. We are the 1%. Why? Because we've suffered enough to be curious about suffering. If we had suffered a lot less in our life, we would have a lot less curiosity, we would have a lot less impetus to change. But if we'd had tons more suffering than this, we'd be oppressed and we wouldn't be able to do anything with it, right? We'd be exhausted, we'd be downtrodden, we'd be not able to move with it. We've had enough happiness, right? To know that happiness is possible. We've had some good days, yes? Good moments, a little flash of light every now and then. Yeah, so we've had enough happiness to know happiness is possible, but it's not consistent and it's not stable, and we want it to be. So, we have enough suffering and enough happiness to really look at what are the causes of these two. If we had tons more happiness than we've had in our life, we would just be drunk with pleasure. It's normal, right? We'd be drunk with pleasure and away with the fairies and just enjoying it, right? And basically, burning off all of our positive karma and not creating any new. You know how you say to yourself, oh, when I've got time, I'll do blah, blah, blah important thing. Yes, but then when you actually have time, you're like, oh, I've got time. Beach. Yeah. Yeah. So actually, when you're probably the most efficient, when you're getting the most done, is when you're a little bit busy and have to be organized, isn't it? Yeah. When you actually are completely at loose ends, absolutely nothing structuring you, nothing sort of telling you what to do, no responsibilities. Unless you're very self-disciplined, you probably just blob out. Couch potato, yeah. Whatever your form of couch potato is, whether it's actually blobbing out and watching television, or it's becoming excessively busy with a number of small projects, none of which have any lasting significance. Yeah. Also blobbing out. It's just a frenetic, busy, socially acceptable kind, yes. So this is what happens when we actually have too much happiness, is we don't use the happiness, we just blob. Yeah. These preliminaries are the things that we need to really sit with tonight, particularly, of how can I launch this retreat in the right way? Who is my teachers? How do I connect with them in a deep way? Yeah. How am I as a student? Am I in the right headspace for this? And then really connecting with perfect human rebirth and realizing that actually there are so few people who have had the right combination of conditions to do something with their life, more than just get through the day, more than just animal pleasures and animal successes. There are really few people that have had the series of circumstances that we have, and it doesn't make us better or worse than anyone else. It makes us lucky. And if we don't practice the spiritual path, given all of our resources, who will, right? And if not now, when? Not getting any younger, right? Right. So this is the thing that we really want to sit with tonight. And then in terms of the small scope, this is really making sure that we're doing practices that will lead to another perfect human rebirth so that we can continue the path. The medium scope is really about making sure that we're examining the root causes of suffering, consciously uprooting them. And the great scope mentality, of course, and all of this is for the benefit of all sentient beings, in order to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. So, just to anchor it all in, let's do a Lamrim prayer together. The foundation of all good qualities on page 93. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect pure Guru. Correct him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful and is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. This life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the Pratimoksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother migratory beings. Please bless me to see this, train in supreme bodhicitta, and bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. Even if I develop bodhicitta, but I don't practice the 3 types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the Bodhisattva Vows with great energy. Once I have pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the 2 is keeping pure vows in Samaya. As I have become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then, having realized the importance of the 2 stages, the essence of the Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy, never giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to realize the teachings of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the Gurus who show the noble path and the spiritual friends who practice it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. In all my lives, never separated from perfect Gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. By completing the qualities of the stages and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Okay. So the next session is at 6:30, and after that will be breakfast, and so just keeping silence until after breakfast, and let's give that a time and say that it's 8:30, so silence until 8:30 tomorrow. But if you have logistical things to talk about tonight, it's the first night, so talk about logistics if you need to, but quiet breakfast for all sentient beings. Your course materials are basically laid out in terms of the first section is charts, then you have the 3 principal aspects of the path, and then a series of readings to kind of support your practice. And we're not going to be particularly looking at this course material in session. This is more for you in between sessions to kind of remind yourself of the teachings, to remind yourself of the content. If you want to bring it to the discussion group in case you want to ask questions about a specific section, that's okay. But this is very fine to go home with you and stay in your room for readings in between sessions. It's a healthy thing and a good thing to do some active reading during retreat in between sessions. But if you need a nap every once in a while or a walk, that's totally fine too. What is important to have at each session is this wee booklet that has Vajrasattva on the cover, and this one is probably best to just leave in the Gompa. So your copy of this one with Vajrasattva on it, which if you don't have now, Sarah will give to you. That one should stay in the Gompa because we'll use it in the Gompa itself. And keep your little Goldie book handy, don't put it away. And during the sessions, I'm not going to be having anything for you to look at during the sessions. I'm just going to lead a straight analytical meditation. We'll start it with a Lamrim prayer together and then go into the sessions. And then once a day, there'll be question and answer. So I've got this green book here, which I'll put over by the prayer wheels on that orange tablecloth table. And it would help if you sort of give me some topics that you want to talk about or particular questions that you have beforehand, because then I'll think about it more. If you want off-the-cuff responses, I can give you off-the-cuff responses, but if you want some really like in-depth, finely tuned questions, you know, especially when we're getting into emptiness and these things, easier if you write it down so that I have a day to think about it and kind of how I want to approach it for the group. So we will have ad hoc questions and discussion during the discussion time, but for kind of like serious, meaty questions, you'll get the best out of me if I have time to think about it. So write them down. Any questions about the retreat or the content of this evening? Everybody okay?
Venerable,
Yes.
I haven't yet passed out the Bodhisattva Vows booklets to anyone, so I'm not sure if you wanted to do that.
We'll do it later. yeah, we'll do it later. No worries. Or tonight. Do people? Yeah, all right. Yes, tonight. So what's happened is in the books there are the Bodhisattva Vows, but I accidentally sent the booklet version to the printers, and so it got printed in a wonky way. And so we're going to give you the booklet instead, so that it's a bit more accessible. So even if you don't have the Bodhisattva Vows, already, having taken them from a teacher, it's completely acceptable to read them, and it's a nice thing to kind of get into your head about what is a nice way to live. So if you've never read the Bodhisattva Vows before, please do read them, and if you already have them, reading them again and again to refresh them is really powerful. So these Bodhisattva Vows will come more applicable when we get into the Great Scope meditations, but they're here for you to read and get acquainted or reacquainted with as part of your own practice. Okay, everybody good?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good sleep, enjoy the space, and I'll see you at 6:30.